Hey everyone, welcome to this week in our series, Meeting God Again. Listen, whether we've ever heard something about God or we've been following Him for a long time, there are ways that we get to know Him better and better and better. As we offer Him our attention and our availability, we come to know Him. Not know about Him, but know Him personally. That's what we're after in this series, and we kick it all off as we look at Psalm 23. Here we go. It's good to be together today. Listen, we are jumping into a brand new series called Meeting God Again. And I just want to say out of the gate, there's like a Grand Canyon difference between introducing something and introducing someone. For 7 years of my life, I got to be a high school math teacher. Do you know the challenge it is to convince sophomores to care about geometry? You may remember, right now I'm a parent of a fifth grader, and I'm doing so much fifth grade math, I can barely see straight, right? Trying to figure it out. If you're not a math person trying to help your kids, bless you, okay? Because holy cow. I got a sophomore and an eighth grader in geometry and a number of other things, and listen, it can be challenging to wrestle with a new topic, to understand something that you haven't really thought about before. You like trying to step into a new career or a new field or a new skill set or a new approach after a time. It can be really challenging to be introduced to a new way of thinking, right? To try to master a new subject or a new skill set or a new trade or a new approach or a new tool or a new context for many of you who bounce around, whether with the Air Force or any number of other things, a new place all the time, trying to gather the next skill set and the next thing along the way. Introducing something can be challenging, but we've gotten better about it along the way. We know how to read, we know how to Google. The Google tells us everything we need to know. Wikipedia, so reliable, right? Everybody, trustworthy source. Listen, wrapping your mind around something and mastering a new topic, it's great. I love that we get to emerge and we get to grow. But that's a totally different thing than coming to know someone, because some things and some ones are not the same, right? Like think about this. If you were to introduce a new topic, there's lots of ways to do that, but to introduce someone is a very personal experience, wouldn't you say? Have you ever had an experience where you know someone, they're your friend, and you have this other friend, but they don't know each other? I call them one-aways. They're like one away from each other because I'm like right in the middle. Have you ever had the joy of introducing two people you really love but haven't met each other yet? Maybe they live in different places, or they just come together for the first time, like, oh, I'm so glad for you guys to meet. And you launch into this, oh, let me tell you all the things that's amazing about this person I love about this person. And by the way, here's all the things I love about this person. And you guys are gonna totally get along. It's gonna be amazing. Have you had that experience? Very different than introducing a topic, isn't it? It's deeply personal, and it never quite feels adequate. In fact, think for just a minute, if someone were gonna introduce you, what would you hope they would say about you? This is my friend, insert your name. What do you hope happens right after that? One of my favorite things is when I get to meet people in different places and I get to introduce them via email, because I get to craft it exactly the way that I want to. I just make them sound like the most epic person you have ever met, with just enough connection and just enough intrigue that they're like, oh, I want to hear more about that. And back and forth, and I'm like, good luck, there you go. For me, if you ever introduce me, I prefer low key. I like the bar low, okay? Low expectations are the key to success for me. Whether it's your Instagram bio or your LinkedIn profile, all the way along the way, listen, there are ways that we try to portray ourselves and introduce ourselves. They're a way of introducing people around us. We also know this, that a lousy introduction can make a really poor first impression. Can I get a head nod? Have you ever met somebody who's like, wow? I say this all the time. A freshman football player came in one time and introduced himself like this. My name is John Winston, like the cigarette. I'm like, you are 14 and need a better introduction, okay? A bad first impression or a misunderstanding of other people can really bring things to a screeching halt before things even get started. And there's something in us that kind of buckles against that, because there's a desire in all of us to really be known by other people and to know other people. An introduction for some things is fine, but an introduction for someone is only the beginning. Knowing someone will require a lot more interactions. For a long time, I was in student ministry, and students would develop these amazing friendships in high school, and they would kind of scatter to all of these colleges, and they would come back a month or two into college and don't understand why they don't have the friendships they had while they were in high school. It's like, man, you can't microwave that. And so you go into this coaching mode of like how to build friendships. It's like, listen, here's how it works. We all kind of know how this works, whether you've moved to a new town, a new workplace, or anything along the way. Relationships form by revealing a little bit of yourself to them and them revealing a little bit of themselves to you, finding just enough connection to stay together long enough to see if what they said and what you said is really true. And as trust builds just a little bit, you offer them a little bit more and they offer you a little bit more, and the trust gets deeper and the connections go farther. And when things go well, when things are rightly paced, right? Not like too much too fast. Have you ever met too much too fast guy? The person who wants to tell you their whole life story and decide you're gonna be best friends on day one? That's when you run, okay? Just FYI. Or back it down a little bit at a time. When you pace things just well, there's this beautiful thing that emerges called a friendship or relationship, in which you get to be more and more you, and they get to be more and more them. You know and explore and discover them. There's like introduction after introduction after introduction. I've been married 23 years. I'm still finding out the awesomeness that is my wife on a daily basis, right? It just doesn't stop with someone's. And as we come to know and be known, it's just right. We also know the pain of the opposite of that, which reveals the same thing is true. We long for real connection, to have a safe place, a caring place that causes the best of us to come out and the best of them to come out together in the same space, where we can be us in all of our glory and awesomeness and beauty and brilliance, and all of the awful, awkward, weird obnoxiousness that's in every single one of us, right? We just want to be known for all of our best and our worst. Here's what I think we can say pretty obviously. We all kind of know this, that coming to know someone is a revealing, like an unveiling over time. But that unveiling and information that we find out about people has to be paired with shared experience that validates what we're seeing and what they're saying. Have you ever been in a friendship or relationship with someone who portrayed themselves one way and then later you found out they were something very different, right? Real, known, quality relationships are this beautiful blend of revealing and experiencing and watching those things match over time. And we know this is true in our friendships and in our relationships. We know how it goes well, we know how it goes bad, but knowing and being known is fundamentally relational. It's between us and others. And we also know this, that our relationships shape us. We talk about this all the time around here. That no introduction of me at this point in my life is really adequate without addressing my wife, Lane. As I've said, 23 years together. Like if someone introduced me, even if they don't know Lane, even if they don't use her name, they will say things about Lane that are true because they have become true of me, right? Our relationships shape us. Someone once said, you become the average of your 5 closest friends. Right? This is true. We know that we are shaped by the people who are around us. So not only do we grow and are revealed in experience, but coming to know someone has the potential to shape who we become. This is why it's so important that we choose intentionally and prioritize time with people who are becoming like the people we want to become. And we get to take that journey together. And all that beauty of revealing and experiencing takes off in a direction, and together we become more than we could ever become separately. Does this sound true to the way relationships work in your world? Can I get a head nod? We're on the same page, and I'll move on. Let me just walk this right into where we're headed for the next 5 or 6 weeks. Why do we change all the rules when it comes to developing a relationship with God? Too many people treat like religion or a relationship with God, their faith, as if we're coming to know something as opposed to know someone. Way more can be learned from the way relationships grow among us in the way we grow our relationship with God. Certainly there are differences, but we throw out too many of the things that are similar, and we treat coming to know God like we're knowing something. One of the things I'm most excited about in our church in the last couple months is that many people seem to actually be looking into what God has said. Like week after week, we'll say, read this, and you'll be like, okay, I'll remember that. And then people come back the next week, and this amazing thing happened. You know what it is? They read it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's gonna serve you so well. You're gonna know him so much more. But we can't stop there. We can't stop at like gathering information. Gathering information is not what people in a relationship do. Gathering information on someone is what stalkers do, okay? You don't want to be that. That's not the same. Now, what we're gonna do, like I said, for this next season is we're gonna take what we've already been building on, like this desire to be rooted and know him little by little, step by step, day by day, root by root, little bit at a time, and walk that into not knowing something, but knowing someone. And we wanna offer you a simple tool. It's really all I'm gonna do today is offer you a simple tool to step in that direction and set you off with some people that over the next weeks, we're gonna do this together. Because there's, like I said, a Grand Canyon difference between some things and some ones. I didn't learn this until I was in my mid-20s. Now, in my early life, I know this is not a lot of people's story, but I did. I grew up around the church. My parents were very involved in the church. I knew all the things about church. I knew all the stories. I could operate a flannel graph like nobody's business. I knew who like Superbook was. I know all the Veggie Tales, all the churchy things. I'd been to camps. I'd been to all the things. Some of you are like, you are the weirdest person, and I think you're right. Somewhere in my mid-20s, and I've told many of you this before, I just found myself around a buddy of mine named Matt who was stepping into a new season of his faith. We were serving together in student ministry, and so often before like a gathering like this or a trip or something, we would gather to pray. And anytime I would hear my friend Matt pray, he just kept saying this thing that just stood out to me over time. It was like a couple months, he just kept saying the same thing. He said, God, we just want to know you. We just want to know you. God, would you just help us know you? And I'm like, why do you keep saying that, man? You and I have grown up in church. We know the things. Like anyone could ask us any question and we would sound confident even if we weren't totally confident in our answer. We like knew the things. Why would you keep praying that? And suddenly, I don't know, it just kind of struck me a month and a half, 2 months in. I just started like, why would he keep saying that? And so I was just thinking about it, and I looked around and I'm like, well, who do I know? And Lane and I had been married for about 5 years at the time, and so I knew Lane. My buddy Matt, who I've already referenced, a number of other friends along the way, guys that I had coached football with, people that I taught high school with. I knew lots of people, but when I thought about how I knew them, it did not sound at all like I knew God. And suddenly I realized I knew of God, and I knew a lot about God, but I didn't know him like I knew my friend. I don't know where you're at in your journey with Jesus. A lot of people know God like a friend, and I just love that and keep going. But I also know a lot of people who are pursuing him like a topic or like information, and that's not the same thing. People who know a thing know a lot about it. People who know a person know a lot with them. They don't have stories about them, they have stories with them. And when you know someone as opposed to something, the stories you tell are deeply personal and get to the soul of who you are, not just the mind of who you are. This is the kind of people we want to be. The kind of people who just don't know about God and don't know the right answers or the right things to do. We're so less concerned with being right. We just want to be with him, and we'll find ourselves headed the right direction often. So we're going to set off and try to do this really, really well together. So we called the series Meeting God, because some people might be meeting him for the first time. Even if you've been around church for a really long time, you know a lot about him, which is going to help you come to know him quickly. And some are just like looking for something better in your life. And so if you are trying to find someone or something to bring into your life to make life way better, there is no better place to start. You are in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. For those of you who've been walking with God for a while, you have the joy and the opportunity over the next several weeks to just look again at your very close friend. Like that moment of introducing one-a-ways, you just get to look at your friend and say, this is so true about you. I can think of 20 stories about why this is true of you. This is so true. I forgot that about you. This is so good. You're just gonna enjoy looking closely at who God is. We spent our last year looking at what the church is. We spent the fall looking at who we are. It's time to look closely again at who God is, allowing him from the Bible to introduce himself to us again, which is pretty important. Have you ever had people get the wrong impression of you? Ever been misunderstood? Ever have someone say some things about you that aren't true and you come to meet that person who found that out and you're like, that's not me at all? I just wonder if some of us here might have the wrong impression of God. And it might just be the perfect time to invite him to introduce himself to you. A.W. Tozer said this one time, I've quoted it many times. He said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Now, obviously, he was a spiritual dude. He was a theologian. He was a Christian guy. And so I don't know that many people who don't think of the things of God would say this, but he said, absolutely, this is true, because what you think of God, if you think of God, will absolutely influence how you respond to him. Like if you think God is a taskmaster, you're gonna do one of two things. You're gonna work your tail off to please him and exhaust yourself in the process, or you're gonna run away and hide and try to avoid chores like some of my kids. But God is not a taskmaster. If you think God is a big, fluffy rainbow, like ready to provide everything that you need in exactly the way that you want, and he's all love all the time, then you're just gonna expect a warm hug all the time, and you'll be shocked if he ever offers you any correction or disagrees with you in any way. And you may recoil if you ever find out he doesn't think all the things that you think. Or if you're on the flip side, if you think God is all truth all the time, uncaring, distant, boom, here it is like a bomb in your life, you'll recoil from that because that'll just hurt. It'll just feel like, oh. But God is not grace or truth. He is grace and truth. He's the beautiful blend of both, but what you think about him will influence this. If you think he just set things in motion and doesn't care at all, why would you have any desire to talk to him or prioritize him? If you're a deist who just thinks, yep, he's a clockmaker who spun it into the world and like off in a distance like, look at those guys screwing that up over there. He's a side note. Maybe you go some places to make you feel good once in a while, but ordering your life around him won't make much sense. Listen, what you think about God matters. If you think God isn't, then I guess the best option is eat, drink, and be merry, because at some point it's over. What you think about God, Tozer says, is the most important thing about you, because he says we tend by the secret law of the soul. That thought influences where we go to move toward whatever our picture or our image of God might be. And so we just want a clear image. Rather than take like gossip about him from others or hearsay or try to live through other people's stories, let's just find our own stories with him. Let's invite him to do something with us. Let's not look at him from a distance like we're observing him, but instead invite him to come close and come to know him like we would come to know a friend. And like I said, we might need some simple tools along the way. This is basically what I started to do after my friend had prayed all of those different things. He said, I want to know you, I want to know you, I want to know you. So here's what I did. I just said, I don't know God like that. And if I just know him at a distance like I've known him my whole life, I think I've done everything I ever want to do with him. I'm probably just about done because it's just tiring. And so I just pulled back from everything and I said, God, I want to know you like I know my friends. It seems like that's what you say, but that's not what I'm experiencing, so help me. I started looking into this book of the Bible called the Psalms, this poetry written by a warrior king, much of it by a guy named David, and a lot of it is just reflecting on who God is in light of the real life he was experiencing. Every emotion you could imagine can be found in the Psalms, from depression to absolute ecstasy. Everything is encapsulated somewhere in one of these 150 poems or songs written in the book of the Bible we call the Psalms. And so I just started in Psalm 1. They're short, they're bite-sized, you can't analyze them, you just gotta live in them. And so I just started reading. I would read it 2 times in one day, anytime I thought of it. I read Psalm 1 2 times and I just underlined everything it said about God's character. And I said, if that's you, God, help me actually experience it. If that's you, God, I want to have a story like that with you. And so that's what I started to do. Because like I said, coming to know someone is a revealing and experiencing over time. Allowing God to show me or tell me who he is, and then asking him to help me experience that, to actually have a story with him. God, you say you are a shield and you protect us. God, would you be a shield and protect me? And over time, oh, there's a story. God, you are a shield. God, you do protect us. The Psalm said he's a refuge. God, are you a hiding place? Are you a place I can be safe? Are you a place I can be me? Are you a place where when everything else is going wonky that I can just rest? God, are you the one who brings rest? Are you the one who renews strength? Are you the one who says this? And just over time, this revealing and experience, and it actually causes us to know someone. Because it's not just someone, it's coming to know God. that is a revealing and experiencing over time. Some of you are setting out in the direction of like really developing a relationship with God. And I want to tell you, like a college freshman, friendships don't happen in a day. They happen over time. And they happen when we offer one another our availability and our attention. If we don't offer people our availability and our attention, relationships don't grow. They simply don't. And the same is true of God. If you really want to come to know him and what he has in mind, not for you, but with you, then we have to offer him our availability and attention. Now, I told you how I walked through that in Psalms, and I wished I had the tool that I'm about to offer you. On the way in, you were handed maybe this kind of calendar-looking thing. If you have that, I want to encourage you to grab that right now. It looks like this right here. If you didn't grab one or didn't find one on the way in, we've got them at the info center and on the way out. What I want to offer you is like the simplest tool to offer God your availability and your attention. In fact, open this to any one of the pages that all kind of look like the same. It looks like this. There's I feel like people's pictures should be up here. They're like a golden doodle or something. It feels like a calendar. But listen, on the bottom, there's this really simple pattern where a piece of paper has been divided into 3 columns, and we've given you essentially the same question at the top of each of these sections in a scripture right here. And here's what we're going to invite you to do. You could do what I did and do it on your own, but I wouldn't recommend it. And while I started at the beginning and walked all the way through, we're going to point you to some really specific places, 6 specific places over the next 6 weeks to look again at who God is and then invite him to help you experience it. Now, you don't need this right now. We're not going to fill this out. I just wanted to show you. It's a piece of paper divided into 3 columns. So we came up with this really clever name for the kind of study we're going to do. It's called a 3-column study. Okay? Really complex. And I just want to model it for you really quickly as we look at Psalm 23. If you have your Bible, you may have even memorized this. Some of you who've grown up around churches, you could probably quote this in any number of versions of the Bible. Some of you may have heard it at a memorial or a funeral that you've been to for someone that you loved and lost. Some of you may have clung to it in some really desperate times. It's one of those Psalms that is such a personal engagement with God. Before I do this 3-column thing, I just want to read it. If you want to follow along, you can, but poetry is really meant to be imagined, thought, experienced, and entered into. Not necessarily analyzed first, but just experienced. So I just want to read it over you. I just want to listen as I read this. Psalm 23, it says this. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. And even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you, God, are close beside me. Your rod and staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings, and surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever." Jesus himself quotes many, many Psalms. Through the New Testament, those who were following him reach into the Psalms. For the whole history of the people of God, the Psalms was essentially their songbook, their prayer book. That people along the way who had experienced and known God wrote of and captured in words their experiential, relational knowledge of this Father God that they had walked with. And they capture it in some powerful words. You noticed it. He said, "Oh man, God, if I'm thinking about the way we've walked together, God, the image that comes to mind is a shepherd. And just like a shepherd takes care, like make sure that you rest at the right time, drink at the right time, eat at the right time, get the kind of strength that you need for the next leg of the journey. God, you're just like that. And yeah, God, it gets really hard. And yeah, we go through some deep valleys and some hard places to get from here to there, God, but I don't need to be afraid because just like a good shepherd, you take me from here to there and I experience your goodness along the way." And he says, man, if I'm thinking of another image, God, you're like the perfect host. When we walk in after you've invited us to your table, God, to eat with you, which is a relational image, the table is just laid out with the best kind of feast you can imagine. And you care for each of us as we walk in. You anoint us with oil so that we look and feel our best, and we never have to wonder if the cup is going to be empty because you provide all along the way. God, you're so good. There's never going to be a moment, God. There's never going to be a moment where your goodness and desire for us it stops coming after us, or your love ever fails us, God. We just want to be in your presence forever. Captures this knowledge of God. And so listen, there was a time in my life where I would have said, God, I want that to be true. Is that true? At this point in my life, 25 years later, I get to say, wow, God, in every one of those things, I can think of story after story where that's been true. But here's how we turn this thing relational. I want to show you, like I said, in a 3-column study. You don't need a fancy printout or anything like that. You could take a simple piece of paper or a napkin at your coffee shop and divide it into how many columns? See, you got it already. You guys are pros. Just going to do 3 simple things. Now, I'm only going to do a piece of the psalm because I don't want you to watch me do handwriting and judge me the whole time, okay? And so I'm just going to do 1 verse, but I do want to model for you what this looks like and show you the power and the experience of this. The first thing you're going to do is simply take that first column and you're literally going to write word for word exactly what it says in the Bible. Whatever version you're following, if you need some help, Info Center, any of our prayer team, any of us would love to give you some advice. We use the New Living Translation around here most often. Copy word for word. Some of you are like, listen, I could copy and paste with my tablet. I could just look at it on the paper. I've got 17 Bibles in my home. Doesn't matter. This is not about efficiency. What this is about is attention and availability. Because as you take the care with your own hand, engaging most of your senses to actually write it down, it dials your focus in. In fact, I sat down with some really mature followers of Jesus, the elders of our church, and we did something like this, and this was the first thing they noticed, how much attention they gave to what the words of God were saying. And it strikes us. So even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Do the discipline of copying it down. But then what you're going to do is this. In this middle column, because how many columns do we have again? You got it, right? We're going to rewrite it in our own words. This is not translation. You are not trying to rewrite the Bible. You are not supposed to be scholars. The goal of doing this is to internalize and personalize what we're saying. So for some of you, well, let me just show you what it would look like for me. Now, I didn't think I could do it honestly in front of 1,000 people or whatever, and so instead what I'm going to do is just kind of summarize what I actually wrote. When I was doing this yesterday, here's what I was thinking is, listen, life is hard. And sometimes it's really dark. I'm not doing mental work here, I'm doing soul work. As I was writing this, I was thinking about my friends who are having some of the hardest conversations of their lives this morning in the state that I came from. I was thinking about the family who just a few days ago I attended the funeral for their 20-year-old daughter who died of an overdose. Can I get a head nod? Sometimes life is hard. Dark valleys. I said sometimes it's really intimidating, and I'm tempted to be afraid. I don't know. Don't judge me. I'm making up letters. If I said this, nothing to fear. Everything in me wants to be afraid. Everything in me wants to be stressed. Everything in me wants to be anxious, right? But if I remember who he is, if I fix my eyes on who he is, I can remember actually there's nothing to fear because you. And my mind starts to think about all the times in my past where I've been really afraid of things. And he carried me through. And my mind wanders to the times where I thought, this is the end. This is how it all goes down. And it didn't. I think of all the negative possibilities I imagined in my last crisis and how many of them did not come true. And then I think back to all the times that he came through in exactly the right way and he protected me. I could tell you story. I don't have time because I'm already running too long, but I could tell you story after story after story after story, like protection, provision, correction, because that's what the staff is about, getting us guided in the right direction. I said, I'm safe. The point is not to translate and capture all the meaning. The point is to listen to God in the midst of what he has said. Listen, I'm just encouraging you, get a napkin, get a piece of paper, or take that thing home. Do some writing and then do some rewriting and watch how God meets you as you rewrite. Then take just a few minutes, ideally with some other people, and point out, what do you notice along the way? For me, I started to notice all the things he does. He leads, he guides, he provides, he protects. He does all these things, thing after thing after thing after thing. You'll see that he does. And what does that create in us? It creates rest. He creates confidence, because surely the goodness of love and love of God will follow me all the days of my life. I look through the whole thing. I know which direction to go, right? All these things that come out along the way, I start to notice. So we got 3 columns: what we write, what we rewrite, and what we notice. And then finally, how are we actually going to respond? You'll see this in the thing that we gave you. We want to respond. We want to put it into practice. We want to act like this is true. So how would I do this? And we just simply think about it. Okay, here's what I know, is that Psalm 23 is all about provision. That God is a generous provider of all the things that we need. In fact, when you look into Psalm 145 sometime this week with this kind of pattern, you're gonna see he is so generous. And so my action step, one of them is to make a gratitude list. Now, I have more specifics to it than that, but I just want to remind and rehearse. It's easy for my mind to wander to all the things I lack and want and worry about, but instead I'm going to back up and point at all the things that he has done and provided along the way. But I also want to do this thing that I've learned recently. It's called contemplative prayer, and it does not, I'm going to spelling it right again. It doesn't matter what that is. I can explain it to you later if you want, but it's a simple practice that invites us to enjoy God's presence. And not only am I going to practice that 30 minutes times 2 in the next 2 days, I'm going to tell at least 2 people about that experience and invite them and say, hey, I'd love to show you how to do this if you want to give it a go. This is how I'm going to put this into practice. Everybody see it? Now let me just do a quick show of hands. How many of you would be able to divide a piece of paper into 3 equal columns? Anyone? Does anyone know how to take a word that you have read and write it down exactly the same? Anyone know how to do that? Okay, could anyone take words and just say them in your own words? All right, so I'm seeing less hands, so you don't. I see it's gonna get hard. Has anyone ever noticed anything in your life? Anyone ever noticed anything? Right, you're noticing lots of things right now. And have any of you ever decided to do something based on what you've heard? My point is, anyone can do this. And as you step into it, and only by experience will you find out that what began as learning about someone can easily turn into encountering someone. In fact, I think they have a picture of what my 3-column study actually looked like. I sat down and did this by myself. So I copied it all down. Here are all of my words. Here are the things I was noticing. Here are some of the things I'm going to do, some things I'm not going to do because I made too long of a list. Listen, it's simple. It's not rocket science. This took me about 15 minutes by myself. How many of you have 15 minutes in the next week? You could make 15 minutes. Listen, your friendship, if you don't have 15 minutes for someone, you are not interested in a friendship with them. You could start on your own, but let me give you a way better idea. Grab a couple people in your life, spend a little bit of time doing this on your own, and then have conversations back and forth. I'm telling you, when I sat down with some friends and did this and listened to what they rewrote, which was so different than what I did, I saw things I never would have seen. I'm like, oh God, that is so true of you. I want to respond to that. I want to do something with that. I don't want to lose sight of that. I want to hold on to that. It's so rich with people. Does anyone in here have a roommate, a family member, a coworker, or a small group? Anyone at all? You have people in your life that you could do this with. You could grab extras of these along the way, take 20 or 30 minutes. In fact, maybe what you could do, if you don't have anyone, swing by the info center. We'd love to connect you with some people. You could go to Discover right after this and sit around a table with some people that maybe you could do this with. Or better yet, you sit in a section of the church. Anyone sitting in a section of the church? Okay, everyone, great. Maybe you've met someone in recent weeks and you say, hey, what if we came 15 or 20 minutes early next week and we just kind of compared notes, talked about our experience? Just the simple commitment to someone else that you're gonna do it might help you follow through and then have a great conversation, and who knows, little by little may grow into a relationship, not just with God, but with people around you. Because here's what we know. Coming to know people around us will absolutely shape who we are, and who we invite into our lives matters. And so invite people into your life. In fact, we want to equip you, and so we gave you this, but how many of you have ever lost anything? Everyone, good. So here's what we're gonna do. Look at this screen real quick. What you're gonna find is a simple number. Nope, that's still me. There it is. Would you just grab your cell phones really quick? Grab your cell phones and send a simple text. Send Psalms to 94000, or you can scan the code and it's gonna pull up your text and send the text as soon as you hit send. I really want to encourage you to do this. Grab your phone and do this. If you want to be on this journey with us at all, if you're planning to be around here more than once, if you're not just here for today, I want to encourage you, scan the code or send the text, because here's what's going to happen. Somewhere along the way, you're going to go to look for this and you're not going to find it, but I bet you're going to find your phone. And so what you'll find is links to get to this. You'll also find a way better tutorial than I just gave you from a staff member named Erin. She'll walk you through once again, or if you're inviting a friend, you could send them that simple link to say, here's what I found out. I would love to show this to you, and I'll send you the resource, and you can invite them to do that along with you. Everything you need along the way for the next 5 or 6 weeks is found there, so don't fail to do this. Okay, now put your phones away. Stop playing games. I don't know about you, but when I pick up my phone, I'm 3 apps deep before my mind even kicks on, okay? So do the thing, put it away. Coming to know people and coming to know God will absolutely shape who you are, and this is who we want to be. Now, a lot of times I'll point you toward another resource, and I want to give full credit to some things that we're doing. So there's this book by a guy named James Bryan Smith called The Good and Beautiful God. Some of your students are actually going through this in our student ministry. Some of the volunteers in our student ministry are doing this as well. I want you to know the next 6 weeks, we have borrowed the titles, the chapter titles from this book as our headings for each chapter to look at characteristics of God. But the content in the book is very different. It's all very good, and it has everything to do with misconceptions of God and how if we look at Jesus, we will see God more clearly, and it will line up really well with what we're doing. It's not the same thing, but it'll line up really well. So if you're looking for a book, if you're looking to come to know God more, I would really encourage you to check out James Bryan Smith's book. We get no kickback on that. It's just a great resource. Each week going forward, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look into the Psalms. We're going to look at Jesus. We're going to look closely at God's character in our time together. And my hope and my prayer is that every single one of us through the course of the week looks closely and gives attention and availability to God in the Psalms so that we might not just know about him or know of him, not just be in his place with his people, but walk closely with him. You'll find in Psalm 23 just some really surprising generosity. There was a quote I started with. You remember what comes into your mind when you think about God as the most important thing about you? Well, that quote actually was discovered by another theologian named C.S. Lewis. Anybody familiar with C.S. Lewis? He's a genius, one of the greatest theologians of the 20th century. He came across that quote and fiercely disagreed with it, and I love it, and I want to show you what he said. He said, I read in a periodical the other day that the fundamental thing is how we think about God. C.S. Lewis thought about that, and he said, by God himself, that is not the most important thing. I'm like, ruh-roh, maybe I shouldn't share this quote. No, he said, what God thinks of us is not only more important, but infinitely more important. What we think about God is not the most important thing about us. What God thinks about us is the most important thing about us. Lewis would go on and say this. He said, indeed, how we think of him is of no importance, except insofar as it is related to how he thinks of us. I just want to say that I think Tozer and Lewis are saying the same thing. And if you'll dive into the Psalms alongside some great people listening closely to God, you'll actually find both. That as you find how much and what he thinks of you, you will think so much more clearly and hopefully about who he is. I have some kids who are teenagers, and like all of us who are really just big teenagers, they worry about what other people think of them. Anybody worry about what other people think of you? Someone once said, you'd worry a lot less about what people think of you when you realize how little they do. Meaning they don't actually think about you that much. They're just as worried about themselves as you are about yourself. You'll worry less about what other people think of you when you realize how little they do. I just wonder if the opposite is as true. You will think so much more of God when you realize how much he thinks of you. In fact, in Psalm 139, it says, how precious to me are the thoughts you have of me, God. Were I to number them, they would outnumber the grains of sand on the seashore. God is so attentive to you. And while we are discovering who he is and finding what we think about him, he has already been thinking about us. In fact, I read Psalm 23 earlier with that in mind, and I was challenging you to think about who he is, but I just want you to listen one more time with this lens. What does God think of you? How often and how much must God think of you for this to be true? The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. And he knows that I need rest, and so he leads me, he lets me rest in green meadows. And he knows I need refreshment, and so he leads me beside peaceful streams. He knows I grow tired and weary, and so he knows when and how to renew my strength. And even when I walk through the darkest valley, because they come to every single one of us, he knows, he sees, he's present, and so we don't need to be afraid because he is where? He's close beside me. His rod and his staff protect and comfort me. He knows I grow hungry, and so he prepares a feast. And he knows there are those who are against me, so he even does it in the presence of my enemies. He's so attentive to what I need, making me my best, and so he honors me by anointing my head with oil, and our cup overflows with blessings. He is so attentive and so good and so present. We can be sure and confident that goodness and unfailing love will come after us, will pursue us all the days of our life, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Which, while that is true of eternity, it is true now, that we can live in his presence always. So this week, grab a few people from your life or jump in with your group, pick up the Psalms study, and begin discovering God in the Psalms, putting into practice and sharing others what you find there. As we get to know him more and more, we'll not only grow in our relationship with him and our confidence with him, but with one another as well. If we can support you anyway along the way, we'd love to. You'll find everything you need to know along with a way to get in touch with us at canyonridge.org. And if this was helpful to you, I encourage you, share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you soon.